Welcome to Which is Best, presented by Code 3 Games. In this episode, the Demogorgon. Which is better, the legacy version or the new version in Monsters of the Multiverse? DM Aaron here with Sam and Manny. This episode, we're talking about the Demogorgon, and it's my turn to talk, so here we go. The new version from Monsters of the Multiverse, or the legacy version from Out of the Abyss. Our Demogorgon has a few changes, and we're going to talk about them now. So first, the lore. In this one, our lore is actually exactly the same, so no change there. Our stat blocks. The Monsters of the Multiverse, kind of amusing, talked about taking the alignment out of most of the things in D&D. Not so much for Demogorgon. He's still evil, so no change there. Now let's go into AC, speed, and ability scores. No changes. The only change we have to our stats is HP. They gave Demogorgon a little bit more hit points, so instead of 406, the average is 464. So a little under 60 extra hit points, which at the level you will be fighting the Demogorgon is about 2 hits worth. So just a little bit extra. Now, let's talk about the other things, the saves and the skills. The rest of that's the same. Features, we have our legendary resistance, no changes. Our magic resistance, no changes. And our 2 heads, no changes. One thing they did take away, though, from the legacy version is the magic weapons. So if you see the magic weapons there, it says their attacks are magical. At first, I was like, okay, they debuffed that. But then it got me thinking, that's only for monsters fighting or for PCs fighting monsters, not monsters fighting PCs, because there aren't really any items out there that give PCs resistance to magical weapons. Just took out superfluous language that didn't need to be there, so nothing too major. All right, let's get into our actions. So in our actions, we have multi-attack changed. It used to be just 2 tentacle attacks. Now it is either 2 tentacle attacks, or you can replace one of the tentacle attacks with the gaze. I like the addition of giving the DM a little bit more flexibility, so I'm going to score a point on the new side. Next, the tentacle attack itself, no change. The gaze attack, the only thing that changed here is in the old version, the PCs could choose to look away, like you could in the Demogorgon or Medusa. In the new version, not an option. So if you use gaze, the PCs have to deal with that automatically. And the DC wisdom save of 23 is still there, so still a pretty big deal. Next, we have part of our biggest changes here are the different types of gazes that we can use. So first, the beguiling gaze, no change, but we do have changes to the hypnotic and confusing gaze. The hypnotic gaze used to be, the attack is the same, but it removed the option to do that in the legendary actions that the Demogorgon can take. In the new version, not so much. You can still use that, so it still gives the DM the ability to use it several times in a single turn. And then finally, our confusing or insanity gaze. It is now called confusing gaze, used to be called insanity gaze. Same content, but I like insanity gaze better. So with the name change, not a huge deal. The content's the same, but confusing gaze, you're not sure who's confused, the Demogorgon or your players, but insanity's everybody. Anyway, moving on down to spellcasting, no change. They just changed where it was in the stat blocks. And then our legendary actions. Our gaze is there, a lot better than what it used to be. And then the tail attack, still there, no change. And then what is new is casting a spell. So the Demogorgon can now cast a spell as a legendary action, where before it had to use an action to do that, which I think makes that new one a little bit more I'd say a lot more powerful to be able to do that, cast multiple spells in a turn. All right, let's move on to our lair actions. So moving down here, the Demogorgon's lair, is in the nine hells traditionally. And so if you're going through the nine hells, this is what you could expect. In the old version, it was a 1 mile radius, and beasts within that 1 mile would go become violent. In the new version, it is a little bit farther out, and actually what they did is they gave names to the layer actions that weren't there before. So if you go down to these regional effects here, the Beguiling Realm is our first named layer action, or I'm sorry, not a layer action, a regional effect. The regional effect here is going to have our frenzied animals, so the beasts within 1 mile would go crazy. Now they changed it up so that it's the same, but you also get disadvantage on animal handling checks. Slight point to the new version because there's more stuff with it. Next is venomous beasts. In the old version, there were lizards included. In the new version, no more lizards. So I guess Demogorgon doesn't have any domain over lizards. Finally, the Beguiling Realm. That's the one I was talking about. So in the old one, it was 1 hour within 1 mile. You had to make a DC 23 Wisdom save, and if you failed, you got to roll on this pretty cool Madness of Demogorgon table. This added really good flavor for role-playing options. You've got someone's plotting to kill me. I need to strike first to stop them. There's only one solution to my problems. Kill them all. Good role-playing options. New version, they got rid of that madness table and instead made it in a 6 mile range. Everybody gets disadvantage on persuasion and performance checks and advantage on deception and intimidation checks, and no madness table. And then finally, what was added was the cultists of the Demogorgon. His followers would get a 2 Minds of Chaos trait, where they would be able to have advantage on all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, so that adds a little bit of flavor to your cultists if you're running a Demogorgon campaign. So, thoughts on this? I like most of the changes in the new version because it gives the DM a little bit more options in how to play this character, makes it a little bit tougher. I prefer the old version and using the Madness of Demogorgon table, because let's be honest, if you're riding into the nine hells on your horses, you're not going to be doing a whole lot of charisma checks for performance or things like that. So I don't really see a whole lot of use for having disadvantage on your charisma and performance checks. Same thing with the kind of line. You've got your PCs that have probably been together for a while, so they're going to know each other pretty well. So if I were to run this as a DM, I would take the new stats and the new abilities from Monsters of the Multiverse, but I would throw in the old layer and regional effects from the old one. Sam, thoughts?
Yes. Well, I'm pretty with you there in terms of just like the Monsters of the Multiverse version is much beefier, and the accessibility of using its gazes within combats as well, and like their attack actions where they can like switch between like 2 melee attacks and the gaze is really, really great. I do like insanity gaze much better than confusing. I love the wording of it. I don't know if you mentioned this as well. Did you mention that the players can no longer avert their eyes to not be affected by the gaze? Okay.
Yep.
There's a lot there. I think I was writing like notes during that time, but I like that where they're like always affected by it. It is a really high wisdom save DC, and I think back to our campaign, we're like pretty high leveled PCs, but even though they're still wisdom saves are still the bane of some of our characters. But it's a challenge rating 26 creature, so of course it's going to be bringing out the biggest of the big guns. So it's not too much of a detriment to me. I do agree with you also where the layer actions in the legacy though did have better flavoring, especially for like how PCs react and whatnot. And though you say like you'd traditionally be hunting down or find the Demogorgon within the 9 hells, I still could see that the new Monsters of the Multiverse layer actions, if you can mix them together with Legacy as a DM, you could easily make this for a Demogorgon that has been pulled from the 9 hells and summoned to the material plane and is now wreaking havoc. It's killed or brainwashed its cultists and is now taking control, and it's affecting part of a city, and you're just like, why is everyone going crazy here? Why is there so much paranoia and fear? And it can make for some really good role playing and story plot within a big city, like, and for like a near end campaign for like a high level party, even for a one shot. But I think in the end it still edges over into the Monsters of the Multiverse version for me. Just as you said, from a DM's perspective, there's much more you can do with legendary actions and you can really mix and match and really use all these gazes and all the creature has to offer, and it would make for a killer encounter with this. Most likely quite literally for some players, but definitely killer. So I'm going
Good
Monsters
points.
of Multiverse.
Sweet. Manny.
I'm going to have to go with the Monsters of the Multiverse version, only because it really makes the Demogorgon more fearsome, scary to fight against, especially if the players are going to metagame and know its abilities. So they know they're going to be in for a fight. And I definitely don't think that Wisdom save of 23 is too crazy. Because the PCs are probably going to be, 15 to 20, level 15 to 20. So, yeah, they're going to have Bless. They're going to have other spells. They might have some items that are going to help with the saves. So, I think it's going to be good. It's definitely the Monsters of the Multiverse version is better.
Okay. Well, let's do our official vote. So, Monsters of the Multiverse, Legacy version. Votes in 3, 2, 1. All right, 3 for Monsters of the Multiverse. Thanks for watching to the end, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.